Now, Ken, if you could first place us, where are we exactly in the English countryside?
You are on the edge of the New Forest, which is dead south, just above the Isle of Wight, west of Southampton, east of Bournemouth.
Okay, and you've lived here how long?
On and off. Well, I was born near here in Southampton, and I've lived here. Well, I've had my cottage since 1972, and I've lived here for several years.
And has the area served as a location for you?
Yeah. The area has, mostly for the music lovers, and Valentino, and a film I did on Bruckner. And it's also going to serve for a film we're just starting on, Sir Edward Elgar.
In fact, that might be a good place for us to start. This is in no way intended to be a sequel. What should we call it? An extension, a return to?
It's called the Elgar Jigsaw. And it's 13 pieces of music which really fill out a portrait of the man. They're pieces of music like mini symphonic poems of people who inspired him, places that inspired him like the Malvern Hills, and things that inspired him like religion. So that's it. It's a sort of potpourri, a little jigsaw.
And in any way, does this represent a revisiting for you of maybe years of your youth?
In a way it does. This was the first Elgar film was the first very big drama documentary I did for the BBC. This is for their rivals, the South Bank show on London Weekend Television, and it's in colour. And it's the first one was a straight documentary. This is more of a pointilliste sort of picture.
Now, you're doing this with Melvyn Bragg, then, in association with?
I am indeed, yes.
Your association with him has extended how many years now?
Well, I did first work with him in the Monitor Arts program in the early 60s. And he's written several scripts for me, including The Music Lovers and several of my TV movies. But this is totally my version.
Now, next question is, the topic at hand, obviously, is the composer biopic. Now, bearing in mind you've done so many other kinds of films, if you don't mind, we'd like to concentrate on that.
Yep.
The whole notion of making a film that is quasi-documentary, quasi-theatrical and imaginative about composers, does this call upon some early childhood musical experience that has proved to be formative for you?
Not early childhood. I rarely heard classical music when I was a kid. I first came up against it, as it were, when I was being, what's the word?
When was this?
In the war, the end of the war. And while I was recovering at home, I just sat like a vegetable in the armchair where my mother did the hoovering around me, the vacuuming. And the radio would be on, and I just sit there like a vegetable, as I say, for week after week. And then one day, suddenly, something began to impinge on my consciousness. And lo and behold, it was a piece of music. And it was such music I'd never heard in my life. And it just sort of brought me to. It's made me wake up. And I thought, I have to find out what this is called. This I couldn't imagine such music as this. And it was a short extract of Tchaikovsky's B-flat minor piano concerto, and I pumped up the tyres of my bicycle, which had lain dormant for 6 months, and pedalled like mad to the nearest record shop and bought the records. And that was my that was the beginning of my sort of vision. I couldn't help but sort of hear music at that stage of my life without seeing pictures. And the two went together, and I suddenly realized that Tchaikovsky's symphonic poems were could be mini movies. For instance, when I heard Romeo and Juliet, I saw the whole thing, flash before my eyes, as it were. And that was really the start of my fascination with pictures and music.
So we are not talking about an educational process, unless you would call it a self-teaching about this kind of music.
I realized at the age of 11 the power of the right music with the right image. The war was on, and I used to give film shows in my dad's garage on a little hand crank movie projector. It was a Pathoscope Ace projector. It showed 9.5 movies.
Wow.
And they were generally Felix the Cat and Charlie Chaplin, stuff like that. Then I realized you could get extension arms for it and show feature films. So next Christmas I got the feature arms, I screwed them on, and I looked around for feature movies, and lo and behold, I found the only ones available on this gauge of film were German expressionist films, and the war was on, so it's rather strange that in my dad's garage, while we were being bombed by Aryan Huns, that I was showing these sort of Nazi films. But as art knows no frontiers, it didn't worry me too much. But it was ironic that as Siegfried was slaying the fire-breathing dragon on the screen, the sons of Siegfried were raining down incendiary bombs all around us. And I had one gramophone record. I basically showed Metropolis and Siegfried. And I found that the one gramophone record had a march by Grieg on one side and a march by Sir Arthur Bliss from a sci-fi movie made in the 30s in England called Things to Come, which I think is a very good sci-fi movie.
Right.
And I discovered that, quite by accident, that when the modern march by Arthur Bliss coincided with Metropolis, the whole screen came alive. And similarly, that when Siegfried was slaying the dragon, the Grieg trumpets, the romantic symphony orchestra of Grieg, absolutely brought the screen to life yet again. So I did discover that, but that's as far as it went, and it wasn't until Tchaikovsky hit me about 8 years later that I got the final message of the power of music and its ability, as far as I was concerned, to evoke images.
At the same time, had you been watching any of the great Hollywood biopics like Song to Remember with Cornel Wilde and others that maybe served as stimuli or examples of what could be done?
No, they didn't come out till I was about I suppose in my 20s or late teens. I don't know, but anyway, I never associated them with art or music. I mean, they were just Hollywood nonsense.
So by the time you get together with Hugh Weldon and you're discussing Elgar, it almost sounds like somehow a new form was being pioneered right before your eyes.
Yes, well, I did pioneer that form, and the first music documentary I made for the BBC was on Prokofiev, and I used mostly Eisenstein movies and lots of USSR documentaries, and then that was more or less all I was allowed to do. I did say to Hugh Weldon, I would be wonderful if I could show Prokofiev walking around in exile and very lonely and very, very, very disconsolate. And he said, he's dead. I said, yeah, I know he's dead. He said, well, is there any pictures of him? I said, no pictures of him. No movies of him. He said, it's impossible. We make documentaries here. We want the truth. You can't dress people up and pretend they're Prokofiev. Well, I said, well, I don't see why not, but if you say you're the boss. I said, well, could I just show his reflection in a pond, say? You know, say you see this figure, this mysterious figure, reflected and lonely. But he said, only if it's a muddy pond and you stir it up. So that was that. And then he did let me show Hans playing the piano, because they were sort of almost abstract. And then the next film I did, I think, was the Elgar film, and he allowed me to show Elgar. I had about 5 people playing Elgar from boyhood to his old age, and they were only allowed to be in long shot or medium long shot, and he wasn't allowed to speak. Then I pushed it a bit further. In the next film I did on Bartok, I was allowed to show close-up of someone I was saying was Bartok, and he really did look like him, this actor, and he was an unknown actor, and that was allowed, but it wasn't allowed to speak.
But you're also allowing yourself some creative license with Bartok and the flashlight prowling through the woods.
Well, that's what he did. No, he did.
And,
he did.
The subway station.
He did prowl through and he hated the subway in New York. It nearly drove him mad. So, you know, I was drawing on what I knew about Bartok.
That subway sequence is one of the most chilling things I think I've ever seen in a movie.
It is pretty scary, and scared me when I saw it.
Now, at this time, were you starting to receive some startling comments from critics who were wondering, what is this man doing with our favorite composers?
Yeah, I was getting comments, but they were generally favourable. And in fact, the Algar film proved to be the most popular TV program of the 60s. It just seemed to touch a chord in the English people, and it revived Algar's fortune, because he was just totally neglected in the 60s. I mean, he was regarded as a bombastic, sort of nonsensical Colonel Blimp sort of character. And as soon as the film came out, the record company started issuing his music, new records, with images from my film to sell them.
But you also took some care to maybe throw a little cold water on the notion that he was some jingoistic kind of patriot.
He wasn't. He loved England like Billy-O, but he the people who discovered him were the Germans. So he was discovered by German conductors. Richard Strauss admired him long before he was recognised in England, and so it must have been rather. And his publisher was a German, and helped him greatly. And so suddenly when all his best friends are being shot, it must have been absolutely awful for him. And so he thought the war was total nonsense. And he also didn't like the idea that Land of Hope and Glory, well, it was never called Land of Hope and Glory, it was always the Pomp and Circumstance March No. 1. And it was jingoistic words were put to it, which he didn't approve of, and he hated, in fact.
As far as a film that might be regarded as a breakthrough, where the fictional elements freely mix with the factual events, would you say the Debussy film maybe did that?
Yes, I suppose it did. And I got round that by not saying it was about Debussy, but it was about a film company making a film on Debussy, so actors were involved and were regarded as such. So he wasn't pretending to be Debussy, he was acting Debussy.
So does that become maybe a creative strategy for you to allow some latitude then in mixing fact and fancy?
Well, I don't regard it as fancy. I regard myself more as I would regard being a conductor, insofar as it's a question of interpretation. You can get 10 different interpretations. I've just been playing a new version of Mahler's 10th, and it's like nothing I've heard before, but it's just as valid as far as I'm concerned.
It must be great fun for you at some point in the process of these movies, just to light upon your favorite pieces of music and think about what kind of image you might juxtapose with it. That must be just a hell of a lot of fun.
Yes, it is. It's exciting and it is fun, and hopefully it's also a bit of enlightenment. It's just what I happen to think of what that particular piece of music does for me in light of what I know about its composition.
Tony Palmer has said to me that his main purpose is to somehow make the image service the music, so that we may actually remember that music better than we ever might have before. How does that remark strike you in terms of your own processes of thinking?
Well, Tony has his way of doing it. I have mine.
Yeah. Could we stay with that just for a second? He regards you as a mentor, somebody who had great influence upon his work. I'd love to have maybe a little mini portrait of what Tony Palmer was like when he first came to you on Isadora.
he stirred up quite a lot of trouble with the crew, to be perfectly honest, if you want an honest answer.
Please.
I wasn't too fond of him, that's not what I was hoping for. On the other hand, he could be very helpful and creative, but he seemed to have some sort of schizophrenic personality as far as I was concerned. And he wanted to imitate me, and I had a house in Ladbroke Square in London that was fashionable. He bought a house in Ladbroke Square in London, but bigger. I had a Citroen car. He bought a Citroen car much more luxurious, and so on and so on.
The camera's shaking.
But I do love him. He's a law unto himself.
How would you best maybe strike a contrast or a comparison among your own respective works on composers? For example, I might suggest he's a little bit more political, and I might suggest you have more aesthetic concerns in mind.
I'm really not in a position to really make a true assessment of that. I don't know his work well enough.
The Delius picture, Song of Summer, could you have made the film without Eric Fenby, and give me some impressions of working with him?
Well, I did try to make the Delius film without Fenby, without his book, and I never wrote a satisfactory script as far as I was concerned. It was always too sentimental or whatever, I can't remember, but it was hopeless. Until I read his wonderful book, and I thought, well, this has to be, wants to throw any light on Delius and do a film on him, this has to be it, because it's so revealing. And I spoke to him, and he got permission to use the book, and also he talked to me, told me things that weren't in the book. And we went together to Delius' old house in France, where he told me more stuff. And it became obvious to me that he was almost schizophrenic about Delius, because he felt Delius had ruined his life, and he had. He, as a boy, in his early 20s, he learned that Delius was blind and paralyzed and still had several works locked in his brain he couldn't get down on paper. So he wrote to Delius and offered his services to help him, and Delius readily accepted. So this rather naive fellow from Yorkshire went to France, lived in the Delius household for 4 or 5 years, can't remember exactly, and managed with a great deal of difficulty to wrestle these 3 or 4 masterpieces out of Delius's tortured brain. And their method of working was Fenby had never forgotten, and that's why the film was so good, because Fenby would illustrate, dramatize the working process that he enjoyed with Delius, and he'd say, "Well, come along, Fenby. What are we going to do today? Let's take up that piece that you thought we might be able to do something you didn't seem to like." "No, Delius, I didn't think it was up to your usual standard." "What? You didn't think it was up to my usual? What are you saying, boy?" "Well, I have to be honest, Delius, there's some very fine things in it. In fact, I think the beginning..." "Yeah, well, how did it start? I don't seem to remember." "I know, it went da-dee-da, 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 da." And he said, "Delius, I can't interpret those notes. I'm terribly..." "Oh, what's the matter with you, boy?" And so this went on, and so this amazing working process he had remembered. In fact, he used to go round to colleges and schools and play the 2 parts on the stage with the piano, and let everyone know how this weird process. So we were able to write down on the piano score they were working from, on the piano, almost like an opera, that he said this, over these notes, and Fenby replied over these, and he remembered exactly what they used to say, or that's what he said. So it was really just copying. It was just copying this process that was so vital, and that the actors were able to really get into. So he said, I said, you must come along and you know, to the shooting and help us. He said, no, I would only put off the boy playing my part. It would be a terrible imposition on him. Well, I said, look, just turn up once. Come, don't tell us you're coming. Just come one day. He said, I might. And we were just doing the meeting where Fenby had just arrived and Delius was sitting in his chair welcoming him, and he was saying, Delius said, well, Fenby, what do you do? What music? You play music? What music do you play? And he said, well, Delius, I play for the films Laurel and Hardy. And Laurel and Hardy? He said, yes, and then I listen to, I go down to the beach and I listen to the bands. They're playing British music now. British music? I don't know British music. Right. There's no such thing. Trust in the Lord. That was the ruin of Algar, poor man. and so
he didn't.
Oh, and then so then I said cut, and I heard sobbing in the corner. There was, and then we all turned round, and Fenby had come in unbeknownst to anyone, and he said, that's brought it all back, and that was exactly as it was the moment I arrived. It was horrible.
Horrible.
Well, it's a bit shocking, isn't it? You go to help someone and they slag you off as soon as you walk in the room.
Well, it must have been startling for him to see someone perform his life anyway.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, he had led
after the film, he developed a skin complaint. It was a psychological thing, and he couldn't wear any clothes. He couldn't go out. He was raw all over for a year, and then he recovered. And he came round to me and he said, Ken, I said, yes, would you lend me £100? I said, yeah, sure, why? He said, I've been asked to go out to America where the university close to where I used to work, and I can't afford the fare. So I said, sure, take it. I never saw him again. But I admired him tremendously. He was a great man, and he felt that his life had been ruined by Delius. He had sacrificed it, but who knows how good a composer he would have been? Maybe it'd have been good, maybe it'd have been bad. But he did write some good music for a Charles Laughton film.
Really?
Yes, it was the Red Inn, the Crimson Inn, something. And it was an 18th century melodrama, I can't remember, about a crazy sea captain or something, and the music was really good, and I think a couple of other pieces, but he felt he could have been as good as Benjamin Britten, and maybe he could, who knows, but it was a privilege to meet him and to make this film, and all the actors, they're all dead now. I mean, they were absolutely brilliant, beyond belief.
Well, one of the great moments in all of your films is when Percy Granger literally drops out of the sky.
Oh, yeah. He's still alive. Yeah,
in fact, there's a film.
Yeah, Percy Granger. I wrote a script once on it, and never got the money. And written a lot of scripts on people. My wife reminded me I'd written on one on Maria Callas, that was never made, and many others.
There are a few things I think in your films more exciting, thrilling than the moments of dictation when Delius and Fenby sit down at the piano.
Yeah.
Cutting that and working in the music as it kind of layers onto the track. Did those sequences take a particular amount of time? How did you plot them out? What gave you that idea, etc.? Which
particular sequences?
That's when Delius and Fenby sit down at the keyboard. I think it's the songs of Sunset they're
yeah, well,
composing.
I just all I did was recreate what Fenby wrote. You know, I mean, that's all I did.
But then to layer on the music on the track, it's a marvelous kind of counterpoint.
Oh yeah. Well, that was the culmination of 2 years' work. You know, of piano bashing. You know, suddenly to realize in orchestral terms they're great work together.
Yeah. then there's this great blaze of music, and yet Delius is barely able to walk. And
That's right.
The contrast between the ecstasy of the music and his physical confinement in his body is heartbreaking and yet exciting.
Yeah, I guess it is.
Sorry.
That's what I meant. I'm glad it worked, in your opinion.
Is there a moment or two, though, that you can recall where you have tried to work out how do I express in an image a moment of creation? We were talking about the Mahler a moment ago.
I just think, how am I going to do it? And then I think how to do it. You know,
Is it the hardest thing in the world to do, though, is to somehow visualize a creative moment?
Well, I think creative moments, they come in flashes, I suppose. I had a creative moment today, and because I have to, doing this film on Elgar, the Malvern Hills were the main creative spark to his music, and so I really got to show these hills. But how do you show hills? Showing hills. I mean, what's a hill? It's so boring. And then, I've thought of various ways. I thought of one creative way, which I don't think I'm going to be able to do, and that would be, he was a great kite flyer. And in my first film, I showed him flying a kite with his daughter, which he did frequently. And then I thought, flying kite's fine. I can show that in colour. I haven't shown it in colour. But the wonderful thing would be, because the hills and everything, the ambience of them was the essence of his music, I would have a kite in the shape of an ear.
Wow.
And it would be Elgar's ear. 10,000 feet in the sky, absorbing everything. Now that's a creative moment, I think, but I can't do it. So I thought, because I'm told the aerodynamics of an ear are not conducive to flight, which is a great pity, though I might still try and get it made. So I thought, I still got to have the hills in it, to have the music, portraying the hills. Then I thought, and so I've got his daughter and him playing golf up the hill. They were great golfers, but they never played up the hill. But so I get them playing golf up the hill. Then today I thought, I still need more. And then I was in the car and I said to my daughter, we were driving around the Isle of Wight looking for locations, I've got it! I've got it! The creative moment is here. I'll have him and his wife pushing a baby buggy up the hill and letting it go down. Now, if that isn't creativity, what is?
Let's just hope there's not Cossack soldiers waiting at the bottom of the hill. That's the carriage that comes down.
That is creation on a high order.
Okay, we move from Delius on into some of the later films. I guess it was the Strauss Dance of the Seven Veils that really aroused a storm of controversy, and at the BBC as well.
Have you seen it?
Oh, yes.
Oh, well, where did you see that?
What a shock it is to see Gable there after seeing him as Fenby. No, I saw it at the BBC, or excuse me, I saw it at the British Film Institute.
They showed it
Yeah.
to you? Right. It's supposed to be pretty well kept under wraps.
Talk about that. Is there some restriction on that?
Oh, yeah.
Has it not been telecast in a while?
Never, since the first day. It was never shown again. The music publishers just went apeshit. Anyway, they freaked out. And maybe it was coincidental, but a week later the BBC had a program of pundits saying that Russell's film was rubbish. Richard Strauss was never a Nazi and he was never like that, and this, that, and the other. So, and there was a huge outcry. Mary Whitehouse
Yes, I've read that.
was
letter.
wanted to sue me and she couldn't, and she found she could only sue the land cables transmitting the program. And they didn't care whether they sued her and she sued her or not. Then Hugh Weldon made a speech in the House of Parliament defending the film on my right to say what I felt about Richard Strauss, which was a great moment. But it hasn't been seen from that day to this.
And you have absolutely no say then over the disposition of
Nope.
the screening rights?
I don't on any of them.
Do you feel any kind of personal bitterness because of that
Nope.
restriction?
Nope. If it rains, you get wet.
Have there been any other films in your work that have aroused any controversy to that degree?
The Devils raised controversy. And I'm told, well, last year I was told they were looking for the lost footage, or footage that I'd cut out, because I knew it would be censored anyway. And it was a sort of rape of Christ. Nuns tore down a crucifix and sort of, I nearly said manhandled it, woman handled it, and that was rather racy.
Is there a director's cut coming then?
Well, there is discussion about putting that sequence back in. I think a new version is due out on DVD. And there is other footage of naked nuns cavorting around and masturbation with dead bones and stuff like that, which might or might not go back in. But I don't know, you see, whether I like that Rape of Christ sequence. I don't know that it was that good anyway. So I'm... no one's asked me whether I want it back in or not. So it's I'm curious to see what's going to happen.
Yeah. Some of the films that I've been able to catch up with recently from the 90s seem almost like chamber dramas. I'm thinking of the Bachs.
Yes.
The Bruckner.
They are.
The Martineau and the Vaughan Williams. In fact, the Vaughan Williams is kind of a home movie, isn't it, really?
Well, they're all home movies in one way or another.
That's my next question. To what degree might we suppose them to have an autobiographical significance for you?
They, if anything happens to me and I think it might go in, I throw it in, Because I consider myself an artist, and I especially with Arnold Bax, that's why I played Arnold Bax, because I felt that I knew Bax absolutely, and I'm a great fan of his. And when I had a little bit of money, I financed recordings of his symphonies.
Yeah, Melvin Bragg said as much on the preface.
Yeah, and and I thought, well, time I've spoken to an actor and told him, brainwashed him as to how I feel Bax was, I may as well do it myself. I also looked like him, and I was the same age that I played him. So I did.
It's a real pity that work like that is not available in the U.S. I mean, we had to go to BFI to see it.
Yeah. Glenda Jackson got an Emmy, I heard, for that. So it was shown in America.
Had you done some research into some of the later day activities of Bax in terms of affairs and things?
Well, I before I do any artist, I soak myself in them for maybe 10 years. Maybe more. So I knew a lot about Bax and what his music, what was going on in his life when he was writing certain pieces of music and so forth.
Now, where did you shoot that?
Where did I shoot it? I shot it quite close to here, some of it on the beach at a place called Highcliffe, which is just down the road. And where else? And locally, it was mostly in Hampshire.
And you also said that the Bruckner film was shot in this area.
Same place, yeah.
Some of the most beautiful exterior landscape photography I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, that's it's very beautiful. Certain areas around here.
What happened with Bruckner there? What was your take on what was wrong with him?
What I said in the film, that it was a sexual thing. He was set up in some sort of racy pub stroke brothel, and with a woman, and he was a virgin, and she was a racy prostitute, and they got everyone drunk, and so it was a very distasteful encounter for him, and it sort of, I think that didn't do him any good.
Right. The scene in which he looks up at the stars through the grating of the windows, and he's no longer counting, is he? That's very significant.
He's no longer counting. No, he doesn't count the stars.
Is there anything, if I may be so bold, is there anything in that moment of epiphany for him that maybe reflects something in your own life?
It could well do, but I don't go into it too much. I don't sort of analyse myself, and I work basically on emotions, not on intellect. So I don't, if an idea comes to me, it comes to me for a reason. I don't know what the reason. I don't delve into what the reason might be, because then I might think, well, yeah, I don't like that, or it's ridiculous, or whatever. So I don't do it.
Is it fair, however, to say that these portraits of composers are not just portraits of the composers, but they're also maybe glimpses into the psyche of Ken Russell?
I'm sure they are. Yeah, because it would be pretty fantastic if I didn't have something in common with Adolf Hitler.
Wow. Or indeed, maybe any of us.
And he said that.
The first half of the Bohuslav Martin film, that's a challenge to the viewer, because you come at us without any kind of preparation.
That's right.
There's no context.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
You're really putting something in our face with that.
Yeah. Well, that's how it struck me to do it. I mean, his music's very sort of confrontational. It's, hey, what's happening, And I think it's amazingly powerful and evocative, and it's full of hidden imagery. You've got to know what it is. And so that's why I also thought to make it into a sort of psychological study.
Did you have a chance to go to Spolitska?
I did go.
And see the tower?
I did.
Is it still there?
I went up the tower.
And the stairs are inside?
The stairs are inside the tower.
Oh, talk to me about that location.
Well, I can't remember it, but except that it's a very tall tower, and he spent most of his childhood in the tower. And if you do look over the top of the tower, as he obviously did every day, people are this big. So his music sounds like ants. It sounds like other things as well. It sounds like trains and sewing machines and machinery and naked women waving flags. So I just put it all in the film.
I almost wish you had not had the psychoanalysis that followed, because we were so dazzled.
Probably boring. Yeah.
Well, I don't know about that. Or maybe it's ironic to think we could explain anybody.
Well, it was an attempt, I don't say it was, it struck me that it might be possible. But that's not what did happen in the tower. He did get mixed, he had a very mixed up life with his wife and various ladies.
Is there still something in you, though, that delights in knowing that you're going to fling images out at the viewer and just leave us to deal with them as best we can?
It doesn't occur to me, frankly. I don't think of the viewer at all. I only think of my dear old mum, who's up in heaven now, watching in the big armchair in the sky.
Now, how do you mean that, thinking of her?
Well, I mean, everyone I've known, somehow I make films for them. Everyone I've known, you too. So even that brat over there, I was shut your fucking mouth. Even him.
To what degree have these films been learning experiences for you? Once you tackle the life of a composer, it must be require from you a great deal of absorption of material before you even turn the crank.
Yeah.
Is this one of the chief delights of this process for you?
Yeah, it is. If I decide I want to do a film on someone, just becoming a detective is thrilling. And I especially remember that on Tchaikovsky. There was, I can't remember the exact moment, but something happened. There was something in the relationship of Tchaikovsky and the woman he married that I couldn't quite fathom. And then, but when we rehearsed the scene in which that sort of ambiguity came about, I suddenly thought, hey, I think this is it, but we've stumbled on it. This could be what it means, why this happened. I can't remember exactly what it was, but this happens a lot. If you recreate possibility, of things you've heard happened, but you don't know why, the answer, or an answer, frequently comes through.
Yeah. Are you suggesting, too, that sometimes the best way to a truth is to approach it with the eye of a poet rather than a historian?
History's bunk, so that's my impression of history.
Well, we forget the word has the word story within it, don't we?
The what? Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Story. That's it.
Now, the term biopic has achieved a lot of parlance lately. You must be familiar now with its use. It's certainly applied to you. Is it a term that you hear used these days? Biopic.
Yeah, the word biopic's used, it's almost a cliche.
Yeah.
Plenty of it about.
Do you think that the frequency now on television and in theaters of movies about famous people, the frequency of this sort of thing, does it in any way maybe derive from the success you have had over the years with this? Do you have any sense of that? You've really paved the way.
I think I paved the way, and people say it works, and that it's very, and they think it's easy to do, and up to a point.
That's an excellent point to take out.
Yeah.
Turn this around. Okay, now you said they think it's an easy thing to do. What were you leading to there?
Well, nothing in particular, except something's just flashed into my mind. That's the film I saw not long ago on a famous authoress who went a bit bonkers. Now, who would that have been?
Iris?
Yeah, Iris. Well, you didn't really... It was just someone sort of doddering around with Alzheimer's. I mean, anyone can do that. But you didn't really get a sense of her art.
Right.
And to me, that's what I'm interested in. I'm not so much interested in, in the physicality of it all. I'm interested in the spiritual side of it, and also the poetic side and the creative side. And that's what I tend to concentrate on.
When you look back over this body of work that you've amassed now, and again, emphasizing the biopics themselves, how do you feel about what you've done? Is it in general what you've set out to do, or has each film been an unexpected kind of discovery for you?
Well, all the films I've done are slightly different, are on different people. They're on different people, so one would expect them to be different, but different aspects, and different aspects of their work and life have interested me. So I've tended to concentrate on those moments. So they're all quite different, I think.
Now, somewhere in your basement, in your attic, under the mattress, wherever, there must be all kinds of scripts that have gone unsung so far. Anything you would care to talk about like that?
I once wrote a script on Alexander Scriabin, the Russian composer.
Yes. He was going to end the world.
He was going to end the world, and he was going to write a symphony to end the world, in which there'll be thousands of performers, dancers, and loving couples, and scents and perfumes, and God knows what. And there were going to be bells suspended on clouds in the Himalayas, and he was going to. The symphony was going to end with him making love to the most beautiful girl in the world on the tallest pile of cushions in the world, to the greatest crescendo of any orchestra ever heard. And at that moment, he was going to climax with the woman, and the world was coming to an end. Well, I thought that's pretty good stuff. And
big budget, though.
Exactly, big budget. And I was talking to some producer, a radio producer friend of mine. He said, "Hey, that's fantastic." I said, "Yeah, never been made. I can't." He said, "Yeah, but he said, do it for radio." He said, "Do it for radio. You can do all that, and just by suggestion." He said, "If you want 1,000 horses galloping across the Russian steppes, we just get the old coconuts out, and there's no problem." And I thought, what a brilliant idea. So I wrote it as a radio play, and the rest is history.
Have you worked in radio media before?
No, that was the first and last.
That's interesting.
Yeah. No, I did one radio program on Katelby,
Yes.
in a Persian market.
Exactly.
He had a terribly interesting life, and but it was a sort of lightweight sort of affair, and it was quite fun.
A personal question, if I may. I sent you my Dvorak in America book.
I haven't read it yet.
Well, I'm wondering why in the world somebody hasn't taken that on. I mean,
It's a good story.
Here's Dvorak with African Americans.
I know. Yeah.
Jazz.
I know the lot. It's fantastic.
Let me know when you're thinking about it, okay?
Yeah, I will.